Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. I wasn't expecting the call that morning. It was one of those quiet Saturdays when the house feels too still, the kind where even the clock ticking seems louder than usual. I was making tea when my phone rang, and I saw my grandson's name light up the screen. He rarely called just to talk. Usually, it was a quick message or a visit during holidays. But that morning, his voice sounded different, softer, almost hesitant. "Grandma," he said, "I was wondering if you'd come over for dinner tonight. I'm cooking." For a second, I didn't say anything. He was 24, living on his own for the first time, and I could still remember the day he burned toast in my kitchen because he'd forgotten it in the toaster. The idea of him cooking dinner felt almost surreal. But then, the warmth in his voice, that little note of sincerity, made me smile. "Of course, dear," I said. "What time should I come?" "6. And don't bring anything," he added quickly. "I've got it covered." That "don't bring anything" was what intrigued me. I'd raised him, after all. I'd seen his messy room, his forgotten laundry, his late-night fast food wrappers. For him to tell me not to bring anything, well, that meant something. The hours passed slower than usual. I found myself fussing over what to wear, not because I needed to impress him, but because I wanted to look like the grandmother he remembered, not the woman who had grown older and lonelier since his grandfather passed. I settled on a soft grey sweater, the one he'd once said made me look like home. When I arrived at his apartment, I was surprised by how neatly everything was arranged. The lights were dim but warm, the kind that made shadows look gentle. A faint smell of rosemary and garlic floated through the air, and there was music, soft jazz, the kind his grandfather used to play on Sunday mornings. He greeted me with a hug. He was taller than I remembered, maybe not physically, but in presence. There was a calmness to him, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. "I didn't know you could cook," I teased as I stepped inside. He grinned. "Neither did I. But I've been learning." The table was set with 2 plates, cloth napkins, even a small vase with a single daisy. Something about that simple flower nearly brought tears to my eyes. His mother, my daughter, used to pick daisies for me every spring. It felt like a small echo of something long gone but never forgotten. Dinner was pasta, homemade, he proudly said, with a sauce that actually smelled delicious. We sat down, and for a few moments, there was silence, the kind that feels comfortable but carries 1,000 unspoken things. He asked about my garden, my health, the old neighborhood. Then, after a pause, he said, "Grandma, I wanted to thank you for everything." I looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" He stared at his plate for a moment, then met my eyes. "I've been thinking a lot lately about how much you and Grandpa did for me. You know, when Mom was working 2 jobs, and I'd stay at your place, you made it feel like the safest place in the world. I never said thank you for that." It was strange, hearing words you didn't even know you needed to hear. My throat tightened. "Oh, sweetheart," I said quietly. "You were just a child. You didn't need to thank me for being your grandmother." "I do, though," he said. "Because now that I'm older, I realize how much that meant. How much you meant." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The room felt smaller, softer, like it was holding us both. Outside, the evening light faded into a dusky gold, and I could hear the distant hum of cars. "You remind me so much of your grandfather," I finally said. "He used to look at people the same way, like he really saw them." He smiled at that. "I hope I can be like him one day." "You already are," I whispered. After dinner, he made tea, chamomile, my favorite, and we sat by the small window in his kitchen. The city lights flickered beyond the glass, and I could see our reflections, side by side, the old and the young, past and future, all in one quiet moment. "I've been meaning to ask," he said suddenly. "Do you still go to the lake sometimes?" I nodded. "Every spring. It's quieter now, but I still go." "I'd like to go with you this year," he said. "If that's okay." I turned to look at him, and the sincerity in his voice was like a gentle hand on my heart. "I'd like that very much," I said. When I left that night, he walked me to my car. The air was cool, and the moon was just starting to rise. He hugged me, a real, long hug, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in his life. I felt, included driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about how unexpected the evening had been. Not because of the dinner, or the effort he put into it, but because of the quiet understanding that had passed between us. Something had changed. We weren't just grandmother and grandson anymore, we were two people who had found each other again in the middle of all life's noise, and as I pulled into my driveway, I thought to myself that maybe, just maybe, it was never too late to rediscover the people you love. I didn't sleep much that night after dinner at my grandson's apartment. Not because something was wrong, but because something felt right, so right, in fact, that my mind kept replaying every little moment. The sound of his laughter, the daisy on the table, the warmth in his eyes when he talked about family. It had been a long time since I'd felt that kind of closeness with anyone. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was pouring through the curtains, painting the room in soft gold. I sat up slowly, feeling that familiar ache in my knees that comes with age, and made my way to the kitchen. As the kettle whistled, I noticed something on the counter, a small brown paper bag. Inside it was a leftover piece of his homemade pasta, neatly packed, with a note that simply said, "For tomorrow's lunch. Love, Ben." It made me smile in a way I hadn't in a long time. My grandson, the boy who once needed me to tie his shoes, had become a man thoughtful enough to send me home with dinner that I decided to call him that afternoon, just to say thank you, but before I could, my phone buzzed. It was a message from him. "Grandma, do you want to go to the farmer's market with me today? There's a new bakery stand I think you'll love." I hesitated for a moment. I had a long list of chores, laundry, bills, the usual weekend things, but then I thought about how rare it was for him to invite me anywhere. And just like that, I found myself saying yes. When he pulled up in front of my house, I caught sight of him through the window. He was sitting in his car, the music low, tapping the steering wheel to the beat. He looked so much like his grandfather in that moment, calm, grounded, patient, that my heart gave a small ache. The market was buzzing with life when we arrived. The smell of baked bread and roasted coffee drifted through the crisp air. Children ran between the stalls, and the hum of conversation filled the space like a soft melody. We walked slowly, side by side. He pointed out the stalls he liked, made me sample little pieces of cheese, and even insisted on buying me a small jar of honey. It felt easy. Natural. At one point, we passed a stand that sold handmade candles. He stopped and picked one up, reading the label. "Lavender and pine," he said, holding it out for me. "Smells like your house." I laughed. "That's because I've been burning the same kind of candle since you were little." He smiled and bought it without another word. After the market, we sat at a small outdoor cafe, the kind where the tables wobble just slightly, and the umbrellas are too small to do much against the sun. He ordered us both coffee and a slice of warm apple pie to share. As we ate, he leaned back in his chair, looking thoughtful. "You know," he said quietly, "I didn't realize how much I missed this. Just spending time with you." I looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "You've grown up, Ben. You have your own life now. It's normal." "I know," he said. "But I think I let too much time go by. After Grandpa passed, everything felt weird. Like I didn't know what to say anymore." His words touched something deep in me. I had felt it too, that quiet space between us, filled with unspoken things. "Grief changes people," I said softly. "Sometimes it builds walls where there used to be doors." He nodded slowly. "I think I'm ready to open those doors again." We didn't say much after that. We didn't need to. The silence between us was comfortable, filled with mutual understanding. When he dropped me off later that afternoon, he didn't rush to leave. Instead, he followed me up to the porch, where the late autumn sun was casting long shadows across the yard. He sat beside me on the old swing his grandfather had built years ago. The wood creaked under our weight, and the air smelled faintly of pine and dust. "You know," he said, looking out at the trees, "Grandpa used to bring me here to sit when I was little. He'd tell me stories about his childhood. I remember how peaceful it felt." "He loved that swing," I said. "Said it was the only place where the world stood still for a moment." Ben smiled faintly. "I get that now." We rocked back and forth in silence for a while, listening to the wind move through the branches. The moment felt timeless, like we'd stepped out of everything else for a little while. Before he left, he turned to me and said, "Would you come over again next week? I was thinking of making something new." Maybe trying your stew recipe. That made me laugh. You want to learn my recipe? He grinned. You're the best cook I know. I should probably learn before I burn my kitchen down. All right, I said. Next week it is. When he drove away, I stayed on the porch a little longer, watching the leaves swirl across the driveway. I thought about how grief had scattered us all in different directions, how easily family can drift apart without meaning to. But now, it felt like something was slowly knitting back together, thread by thread. That night, as I sat in bed, I realized something I hadn't noticed before. I wasn't lonely anymore. The house was still quiet, yes, but it was a peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that comes when your heart feels full. And for the first time in years, I fell asleep smiling, already looking forward to next week's dinner. The following week arrived quicker than I had expected. All through Monday and Tuesday, I found myself thinking about our plans. I had even dusted off my old cookbook, flipping through pages that smelled faintly of my kitchen and the years past. It felt strange, preparing for someone else to taste my recipe after all this time. There was a nervous excitement in me I hadn't felt in years, a flutter of anticipation, not just about cooking, but about seeing him again. When I arrived at Ben's apartment that Friday evening, he was waiting at the door with that familiar smile, one that somehow carried both his boyish charm and the man he had become. The warmth of that smile reached into the deepest corners of my heart, and I realized how much I had missed simply being with him. "Grandma," he greeted, opening the door wide. "I've got everything ready. I even cleaned the counters this time." I laughed softly, noticing how proud he was of something so ordinary. It reminded me of when he was a boy and would show me his little victories, the drawing he made or the tower of blocks he built. "You're becoming quite the domestic wizard," I teased, stepping inside. He shrugged, grinning, "Just trying to impress my favorite chef." We moved into the kitchen together. I unpacked the ingredients while he chopped vegetables with surprising precision. The room filled with the comforting smells of onions, garlic, and fresh herbs. As we worked, conversation flowed naturally. We shared memories, funny childhood stories, tales about my late husband, even small confessions about the worries that had kept us awake at night. At one point, he paused, looking thoughtful. "Grandma, did you ever think that maybe your life would feel smaller without Grandpa?" I looked at him, surprised at the depth of his question. "Sometimes," I admitted. "There are moments when the silence hits too hard. But then there are times like these, when family is near, and I feel that life isn't empty at all." He nodded, as if my words confirmed something he had felt for a long time. "I think I understand now. Even when people are gone, the things they taught us, the love they gave, it doesn't disappear." As the stew simmered on the stove, the kitchen filled with a golden glow from the overhead light, casting gentle shadows on the walls. We stood side by side, working silently for a few moments. There was a rhythm to our movements, a quiet understanding that made the room feel intimate in the most wholesome way. When it was finally ready, we set the table together. He had even pulled out the cloth napkins and lit a candle in the center, a small act that touched me deeply. The scent of the stew, mixed with the flickering light, made the apartment feel like a home in every sense of the word. We sat down, and for the first time, I realized how much I had missed simply sharing a meal with him. The food was delicious, but it wasn't the flavors that lingered in my memory, it was the presence, the laughter, the quiet moments between words. Halfway through dinner, he put down his spoon and looked at me with a softness that caught me off guard. "Grandma, I hope you know how much this means to me. Not just the dinner, everything. Your time, your stories, your company." I felt a lump in my throat. "Ben, you've grown into a remarkable man. Spending time with you feels like a gift I didn't know I needed, but now can't imagine living without." He smiled, and there was a pause, the kind that doesn't feel empty but full of unspoken trust and connection. After dinner, we moved to the living room, where he had prepared a small pot of tea. We sat on the couch, side by side, sipping slowly. Outside, the city hummed softly, lights blinking in the distance, but inside, it felt like the world had slowed down just for us. He turned to me, a playful glint in his eye. "You know, Grandma, I've been thinking, maybe we could start a little tradition. Every week, we cook something new together. Just us." I laughed softly, the sound warm and genuine. "I'd like that. It's a wonderful idea." We talked late into the evening, not just about food, but about dreams, fears, and little reflections about life. He shared stories about work, his ambitions, and the small victories that often go unnoticed. I shared memories of my own youth, of lessons learned, and of my hopes for him. Before I knew it, the night had deepened, and it was time to leave. As I hugged him goodbye, there was a lingering warmth in the embrace, a quiet acknowledgement that our bond had deepened in ways neither of us had expected. Walking back to my car, I thought about how unusual it was to feel such closeness again after years of life moving so fast. The world felt different that night, calmer, softer, yet filled with promise. It was as though the simple act of sharing time, of being present with someone you love, could reshape your perspective entirely. When I arrived home, I sat by the window, watching the city lights reflect on the streets below. I thought about how moments like these, unexpected, simple, and deeply sincere, leave an imprint on your heart. They remind you that life, even with its hardships and quiet gaps, has a way of offering treasures when you least expect them. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I realized that the connection I had with Ben was evolving, becoming a partnership of respect, love, and mutual understanding. Something that would grow stronger, not because of grand gestures, but because of quiet evenings, shared laughter, and the gentle warmth of knowing someone truly sees you. The following weekend, Ben called me early, his voice bright and cheerful. "Grandma, I've got a plan for us today. Can you be ready by 10? Curiosity bubbled up in me as I got dressed. I chose a comfortable blouse, something soft against the skin, and a light scarf that reminded me of spring days long past. When I arrived at his apartment, he was waiting with a small backpack slung over one shoulder and a grin that was impossible to resist. "Where are we going?" I asked, peering at him with playful suspicion. "You'll see," he replied mysteriously. "It's a surprise." We drove for what felt like a short eternity, talking and laughing along the way. The city faded behind us, replaced by stretches of trees, fields, and quiet country roads. Eventually, we arrived at a small, serene lake I hadn't visited in years, a place that held memories of Ben as a little boy, splashing along the edge with his father, building tiny dams with sticks and stones. He helped me out of the car and handed me a thermos. "I thought we could have a little picnic," he said. "Just us, like old times." Sitting by the water, the gentle lap of waves against the shore creating a soft rhythm, I felt a profound sense of peace. Ben laid out a blanket, unpacked sandwiches, fresh fruit, and even a small dessert he'd made himself. The effort he had put into these small gestures touched me deeply. It was a quiet, meaningful way of showing care. We ate slowly, savoring not only the food but the presence of each other. The air was crisp and smelled faintly of pine and damp earth, a reminder of childhood days I hadn't thought of in decades. As we talked, he shared stories from his work and his friends, his successes and minor failures, and I listened, laughing when appropriate and offering advice when asked. At one point, he reached over and picked up a small rock from the ground. "Grandma," he said, "do you remember the time we made a little stone garden here?" I smiled, the memory rushing back vividly. "I do. You insisted on arranging the stones in a perfect circle, and you wouldn't let anyone touch it." He laughed, a warm, easy sound that carried across the lake. "I was very serious about it. It was our secret garden." We spent the afternoon reminiscing, sharing quiet moments of reflection and laughter. At some point, we simply sat side by side, looking out over the water in companionable silence. It was a silence that spoke volumes, one of understanding, love, and the gentle strengthening of bonds across generations. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting a golden glow across the lake, Ben stood and offered his hand. "Come on, Grandma. I have one more surprise." He led me along a small trail, lined with trees whose leaves were just beginning to turn. The crunch of autumn beneath our feet, the soft whisper of wind through the branches, created a perfect soundtrack for what was coming. We reached a small wooden dock that extended into the lake. There, a rowboat waited, oars resting gently inside. "I thought, maybe we could row a little," he said. "Just like the times you taught me to balance the oars." The idea was simple, yet deeply moving. I had always loved the water, and sharing this moment with him, the grandson who had grown into such a thoughtful, caring man, felt like a quiet, profound gift. We climbed into the boat, and he took the oars first, showing me how to adjust them for comfort. The water was smooth, reflecting the fiery colors of the sunset, and as we rowed, the world seemed to melt away. I felt connected not only to Ben, but to the memories of the past, the love that had carried through the years, and the present, which was far more precious than I had realized. At one point, he stopped rowing and simply let the boat drift. He looked at me with a seriousness that made my heart skip a beat. "Grandma," he said softly, "I want you to know how much I value our time together. You've given me so much without ever asking for anything in return. I hope you know that." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back. "Ben, you don't have to say that. I've always loved being with you. You make these moments unforgettable." We sat in silence for a while, letting the water and the fading light wrap around us. In that simple, quiet way, I realized how deeply our bond had grown. It wasn't just about family anymore, it was about two people recognizing each other's hearts, learning from one another, and cherishing the fleeting, precious moments that life offers. When we finally returned to the dock, I felt a gentle sense of fulfillment, a satisfaction that comes from connection, understanding, and shared joy. Ben helped me out of the boat, and we walked back toward the car, the cool evening air carrying the scent of the lake and the lingering warmth of the day. As I drove home, the memory of that day stayed with me. I thought about how life can surprise you in the quietest ways, how love and connection can deepen over time, and how sometimes, the simplest gestures, a meal, a picnic, a shared row on a lake, can leave the most lasting impressions. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a quiet, profound gratitude. Ben wasn't just my grandson, he was a companion, a reflection of love past and hope for the future. And I knew, with a certainty that warmed me to the core, that this bond, unexpected, tender, and deeply emotional, would stay with me for years to come.